She won the competition, not once, twice. The most respected art commission in the country looked at her design and declared it the best, and then declared it the best again. And still, one powerful man overruled her and handed the job to someone else. Her design was locked away, and she went to her grave, never seeing it on the coin it was made for. It would take 90 years, nearly a century, long after everyone involved was dead, for America to finally right that wrong and put her work where it always belonged. Her name was Laura Garden Fraser, and this is the story of the Washington quarter, the coin in every American's pocket, and the woman who was cheated out of it. It starts with a birthday, a very big one. The year 1932 marked 200 years since the birth of George Washington, the father of the country. The nation wanted to celebrate, and Congress wanted to mark the moment on its money. The original plan wasn't even for a quarter at all. It was going to be a commemorative half-dollar, a one-year tribute. But plans shifted, and the decision was made instead to permanently redesign the quarter, replacing the standing Liberty quarter that had run since 1916, and putting the first president's face on it, where he has remained ever since for nearly 100 years. There was one firm rule for the design. Every artist entering the competition had to base their portrait of Washington on the same source, and it's a wonderful piece of history. In 1785, a French sculptor named Jean-Antoine Houdon had traveled all the way to Mount Vernon at the urging of Benjamin Franklin and made a life mask of the living George Washington, pressing plaster directly onto the face of the real man to capture his exact features. That bust is considered the most accurate likeness of Washington that exists, not a painter's flattering imagination, but the actual contours of his face. So the Washington on your quarter traces directly back to a mold taken from the living president's own skin. When you look at that profile, you are in a real sense looking at the true face of George Washington. And there is a deep irony in that face being on the quarter at all, one Washington himself would have found hard to swallow, because in his own lifetime, George Washington refused to appear on American money. When Congress was writing the very first Coinage Act, back in 1792, an early version of the bill called for the sitting president's portrait to be placed on the nation's coins. Washington rejected it. To him, a ruler's face stamped on the money was the mark of a monarchy, exactly the thing America had just fought a bloody revolution to escape. He had spent 8 years at war with the armies of King George III. The last thing he wanted was his own head on a coin like some king or Roman emperor. His ally, James Madison, argued the provision out of the bill as fundamentally un-Republican, and the final law instead required that American coins bear an image emblematic of liberty, a symbol, never a leader. British minters had even struck sample Washington cents with his portrait, hoping to win the contract to make America's money. Washington turned them down flat. He wanted his face nowhere near the coinage. And so here is the irony folded into every quarter. The one founding father who most adamantly refused to be on American money became, a century after his death, the single most reproduced face in it, struck onto billions upon billions of coins, staring out from more American pockets than any portrait in history. The man who kept himself off the money to prove America was no monarchy is now the most common face in the entire currency. Now to the competition and the injustice at the heart of this coin. Among the artists who entered was Laura Garden Fraser, and she was no unknown. She was one of the most accomplished coin and metal sculptors in America, the designer of celebrated commemorative coins, an artist at the top of her craft. She also happened to be married to James Earl Fraser, and if that name sounds familiar, it should, because James Earl Fraser designed the Buffalo nickel. This was, quite literally, the first family of American coin design. And when the judges of the United States Commission of Fine Arts reviewed the entries, they chose Laura Garden Fraser's design as the winner. Her Washington was strong, dignified, beautifully modeled. But there was a man standing between her and the coin, the Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon. Mellon was one of the richest men in America, a banker and industrialist, a titanic art collector, and by many accounts deeply stubborn. And for reasons that have been debated ever since, Mellon simply did not want Fraser's design. He preferred the work of a different sculptor, a New York medalist named John Flanagan. The Fine Arts Commission pushed back. They recommended Fraser again. Mellon, placating them, called for a second review, and the commission chose Fraser a second time. Twice the experts declared her the winner, and twice Mellon overruled them, insisting on Flanagan. Why? No one can say for certain, and that uncertainty is part of the coin's story. Some point to simple stubbornness, a wealthy man used to getting his way. Others have long suspected something uglier, that Mellon, a man of his era, simply did not want a woman's name on the nation's quarter. Whatever the true reason, the outcome was fixed. Mellon got his way. And when the first Washington quarters were released on August 1st, 1932, they bore John Flanagan's portrait of Washington, the one we still carry today, while Laura Garden Fraser's superior twice-chosen design was quietly set aside. To be fair to Flanagan, his work has its own quiet lineage. He had studied under the great Augustus St. Gaudens, the master behind the most beautiful gold coins America ever struck. His Washington is competent and enduring. But the sting of what happened to Laura Fraser never fully faded from the story, and history, it turns out, was not finished with her. The coin itself went on to live an enormous life. For its first 3 decades, from 1932 through 1964, the Washington quarter was struck in 90% silver, real solid silver, and then it hit the same wall that every American coin of that era ran into. By the mid-1960s, the price of silver had climbed so high that the silver in the coins was becoming worth more than the coins themselves, and Americans began hoarding them by the roll. The government's response was the Coinage Act of 1965, which stripped the silver out. From 1965 on, the quarter became what it is now, a clad sandwich, a core of pure copper wrapped in layers of copper nickel. It's why, to this day, a quarter dated 1964 or earlier is worth many times its face value in silver, while the identical-looking 1965 is worth exactly 25 cents. The dividing line runs invisibly between 2 years, and it's why silver Washington quarters are still hunted through pocket change and bankrolls today. Then came another birthday, and one of the most beloved quarters ever made. As America approached its 200th birthday in 1976, the Mint decided to celebrate the bicentennial by temporarily changing the backs of the quarter, half dollar and dollar. A public competition was held for the quarter's new reverse, and the winner was a design showing a colonial drummer boy, a young Revolutionary War drummer, ringed by a victory torch and 13 stars. And every one of these coins carries a small detail people love to discover: the dual date, 1776 to 1976. Here's the quirk that trips up collectors to this day. There is no such thing as a 1975 quarter. None were made. The Mint jumped straight from 1974 into producing the dual-dated bicentennial coins. So for 1 year, the ordinary date simply doesn't exist. Nearly 2 billion of those drummer boy quarters were struck, which means they're still incredibly common in change. An American can quite easily find in their spare quarters a little piece of the nation's 200th birthday. And then finally, the story came full circle in a way almost no one saw coming. For decades, Laura Garden Fraser's rejected design sat in history's drawer. In 1999, it was dusted off and used on a commemorative $5 gold coin, a small, belated nod. But the real justice came later. In 2022, 90 years after she first submitted it, 90 years after Andrew Mellon overruled the experts and pushed her aside, the United States Mint finally placed Laura Garden Fraser's portrait of George Washington on the circulating quarter as the face of a new series honoring American women. The design that was twice chosen and twice denied, the work of a woman some believe was rejected simply for being a woman, now sits on the quarter honoring women's contributions to the country. She never lived to see it, but America got there in the end. So the next time a quarter drops into your hand, look at that familiar profile of Washington. It traces back to a mask pressed onto the face of the living president himself. It rode through the end of silver coinage in America and marked the nation's 200th birthday with a drummer boy and a date that skips a year. And it carries, folded quietly into its history, the story of Laura Garden Fraser, the artist who won and won again, who was denied by one stubborn man, and who finally, 90 years later, took her rightful place on the most common coin in America. That is the Washington quarter, a coin of the father of the country and of the woman who waited a century for justice.